From the first moment Harper came into Evelyn's life, he was an unexpected miracle. The Pitbull puppy arrived in a tangle of wagging limbs and soulful eyes on a late summer afternoon. Brought over by a kind-hearted neighbor who had rescued him from a roadside ditch. Though Pitbulls were often misunderstood, Evelyn felt an immediate bond the moment she looked into Harper's gentle eyes. She could sense the longing for comfort that pulsed through every nervous quiver of his small body. At the time, Evelyn was living alone in a modest, single-story house on Cherrybrook Lane, a quiet road where neighbors greeted one another from porches and occasionally shared cups of sugar. The house itself was simple, white with blue shutters and a little garden out front where she grew her beloved daisies. She had been on her own for nearly 2 years, ever since her last relationship ended, and though she hadn't told anyone, she was beginning to wonder if she might be one of those people destined to live life mostly in solitude. Then Harper arrived. Evelyn crouched down and tentatively held out her hand. The puppy, all enormous eyes and overly large paws, licked her fingers and then pressed his tiny muzzle into her palm as though it were the safest place in the entire world. It was in that moment she decided that, no matter what challenges might come with raising him, Harper was going to stay. She quickly discovered that the dog was a steadfast shadow, following her everywhere across the house. If Evelyn settled on the couch to read or watch television, Harper was there, lying across her feet in a warm, comforting weight. If she washed dishes, he sat at a slight distance, ears perked, gaze fixed upon her, as though to make sure she wouldn't vanish. When she first took Harper to the local veterinarian, Dr. Albright, she was a bit apprehensive about how others might perceive him. Pitbulls had garnered a reputation for aggression in certain circles, and she knew that many people took one look at the wide head, muscular build, and powerful jaws and felt fear. But Dr. Albright was an older man with gentle hands and a penchant for calming even the most skittish animals. He gave Harper a thorough checkup and declared him slightly underweight but otherwise healthy. Evelyn admitted that she didn't know Harper's past, only that someone had left him in a ditch, and Dr. Albright offered a sad smile. "His past doesn't matter as much as his future does," he said softly, stroking the puppy's head, "and I can see you care for him already. So I'd say he has a bright future indeed." That was all Evelyn needed to hear. She left the clinic clutching her newly vaccinated puppy to her chest, feeling a rush of gratitude and promise. Over the ensuing weeks, she learned how to house-train Harper, feed him small, frequent meals until he reached a healthier weight, and most importantly, shower him with the affection he so clearly craved. The bond that formed between them was immediate and profound. While some of Evelyn's friends teased her about being a crazy dog lady, few denied the positive changes they saw in her demeanor. She was more relaxed, more optimistic. It was as though Harper's unwavering devotion filled a void she hadn't realized was there. Evelyn wasn't especially well versed in dog breeds. She knew the basics. Pitbulls were strong, often used in negative contexts like dogfighting, and many people held misconceptions about them. She decided that from the start, she would enroll Harper in obedience classes at a reputable local training school. The trainer, Samantha Delgado, ran her classes out of a large barn that had been converted into a training facility. Samantha was known in the region for her calm yet firm approach, which emphasized positive reinforcement. When Evelyn first walked in, Harper's curious nose sniffed at every new scent while Evelyn scanned the room. She noticed a wide range of dogs, German shepherds, golden retrievers, a big mutt of indeterminate lineage, and even a tiny Shih Tzu that seemed to regard Harper as a giant. Samantha approached Harper without a trace of trepidation, squatting down and letting the puppy sniff her palm. She gently cupped his broad, sweet face and beamed up at Evelyn. "He has a very kind expression," she said. "Pitbulls are such people-loving dogs when they're treated well. I'm glad to see you investing in training. It'll help him build confidence and manners as he grows." And grow he did. In the span of a few months, Harper transformed from an awkward, lanky puppy into a muscular young dog. His head remained broad, his jaws strong, but there was a distinct softness to his eyes that was impossible to miss. He excelled in training class, learning commands like sit, stay, and down, with a willingness that surprised even Samantha. He was affectionate and social, wagging his tail vigorously at both people and other dogs. though some owners kept a wary eye on him, a few admitting they had preconceived notions about pit bulls. Harper quickly won them over with his calm interactions. After completing the basic obedience course, Harper and Evelyn grew almost inseparable, often going for morning jogs along the scenic path behind the neighborhood. This route meandered through a small patch of woods, then emerged at a clearing where a pond reflected the changing sky. Evelyn felt comfortable with Harper at her side, especially in the early morning when few others were around. As soon as she clipped on his leash, Harper would let out an excited but quiet huff, wagging his tail so hard that his entire rear end swayed. The crisp air against their faces, the rustling of leaves beneath their feet, and the subtle companionship they shared made these jogs more than just exercise. They became a sanctuary from the busyness and occasional loneliness of life. And at home, once the jog was done and they both had eaten, Harper would lie contentedly at Evelyn's feet while she scrolled through her laptop or flipped through the newspaper. He was always there, a comforting presence, anchoring her in ways she hadn't anticipated. That first year was idyllic. Evelyn landed a new job at a small publishing firm, which suited her love of books and editing. While she worked, Harper stayed at home, either curled up in a sunny spot on the living room floor or napping in his crate. On her lunch breaks, she'd dash home to walk him around the block and share a few moments of bonding before returning to her desk. In the evenings, they would curl up on the sofa, Evelyn reading manuscripts on her tablet while Harper's head rested on her thigh. She even bought him a plush bed of his own, but he preferred to snuggle by her side, lulled by the sound of her steady breathing. The quiet routine formed the backbone of their life together, and both thrived on that stability. As Harper grew from puppyhood into adulthood, Evelyn marveled at his devotion. It wasn't simply that he followed her around, tail wagging. There was a deeper emotional undercurrent. If she felt down, he would whine softly and rest his chin on her knee, as if to say that he was present for whatever she needed. If she was excited about something, Harper seemed to mirror her enthusiasm, bounding around in circles until she had to laugh at his antics. They had formed a team of two, each supporting the other without question. In many ways, Evelyn recognized that Harper wasn't just a pet, he was a reflection of her best qualities and a safeguard against her worst fears. She also discovered that Harper had a particular sensitivity to sickness or stress. Once, when Evelyn came down with a nasty bout of flu, Harper sensed her discomfort immediately. He normally jumped on the bed with reckless enthusiasm, but during those days, he hopped up carefully and settled down near her feet, not pressing his weight against her but staying close enough to watch over her. He seemed to understand that she needed rest more than anything else. He barely left her side, almost as though he worried something grave might happen if she was alone. That unwavering concern proved to be a hint of the loyalty he would later display when things took a more dire turn. Over time, Evelyn's health stabilized, her immune system bounced back, and life marched on in a series of calm, predictable steps. Then, one early winter morning, an unexpected twist appeared on her horizon. She woke with a dull ache in her side, a pain that initially felt like a pulled muscle from an awkward stretch. She tried to ignore it, heading into the office to tackle her daily tasks. However, as the day progressed, the ache intensified, overshadowing her ability to concentrate on manuscripts. By early evening, she was doubled over in the break room, clutching her side and struggling to remain composed in front of concerned coworkers. Her boss, Miriam, insisted on driving her to the nearby hospital, where Evelyn was admitted for observation. Tests were run, blood work, an ultrasound, and eventually a CT scan. The doctors found growths on Evelyn's kidneys, suspicious enough to warrant a biopsy. Tapping her foot nervously while waiting for the results, Evelyn thought about Harper alone at home. She had left in a rush that morning, not suspecting anything serious. Miriam, ever practical, arranged for a neighbor to check in on him. The entire situation felt surreal to Evelyn. She was only in her 30s, healthy, and rarely even caught a cold. Yet here she was, sitting in a hospital bed, wearing a thin gown and an IV in her arm. 3 days later, the biopsy results came back. Evelyn had renal cell carcinoma, kidney cancer. She felt as though the words were daggers, slicing through the safe bubble of her day-to-day life. The doctors discussed treatment options, including potential surgery to remove part or all of her affected kidney. The prognosis was uncertain. As it often is with cancer, much depended on how advanced it was, how her body responded, and the specifics of the tumor. In a haze, she found herself contacting family members she rarely spoke to, updating them on her condition. She also reached out to Dr. Albright, her veterinarian, not because it was strictly necessary, but because she felt an odd compulsion to inform him that Harper might need a different caretaker if things went poorly. When at last Evelyn was discharged with a mountain of appointments looming, she returned home to find Harper at the door, tail wagging in frantic circles. As soon as she stepped inside, he jumped up gently and pressed his forehead against her chest, as though giving her the warmest canine hug possible. Tears that she had been holding back in front of the doctors finally flowed. She sank to her knees and let Harper's comforting presence wash over her. She realized that no matter what the test results or prognosis might be, she wasn't alone in this fight. There was a creature who loved her unconditionally, whose life revolved around hers, and who would stand by her side no matter what. The realization was both comforting and heartrending. She feared letting him down, feared what might happen if she became too weak to care for him, or if the cancer claimed her life. Who would love Harper the way she did? She needed to gather her courage, not just for her own sake, but for his as well. So began the whirlwind of medical treatments, a series of hospital visits, consultations with oncologists, and eventually a surgery date set for mid-December. The plan was to remove most of the affected kidney and hope that the cancer hadn't spread beyond that. Harper, sensing a shift, became especially attentive. He would lie close to Evelyn at night, occasionally resting his chin on her ankle as though anchoring himself to her presence. She often awoke in the night to find his brown eyes watching her from the floor or from the foot of the bed. In the week leading up to surgery, Evelyn's mind was awash with concerns, finances, time off work, potential complications, but overshadowing all of that was the question of Harper. She would be in the hospital for several days at least, maybe longer if there were any complications. Miriam offered to feed and walk him, and a couple of neighbors also volunteered to help. Still, Evelyn worried that Harper might be confused or distressed by her absence. She tried explaining to him, as though he could fully understand. She would kneel before him, stroke his broad head, and whisper, "Harper, I had to go away for a little while, but I promise I'll come back to you. You stay strong, okay?" He would stare back, tilting his head slightly at her tone, and give her face a soft lick. She could almost believe he understood every word. The day of the surgery arrived amidst a flurry of snow. It was an unusually cold day, the kind where the sky feels gray and endless. Evelyn's neighbor, Lily, drove her to the hospital in a swirling hush of snowflakes. Harper was left at home, but Lily promised to check on him multiple times a day. After a long wait in pre-op, Evelyn was taken into the operating room. She had never been so frightened in her life. Not because of the surgery itself, though that was daunting, but because of the possibility of a life cut short before she had truly lived it. She thought of Harper's puppyhood, of the warmth in his eyes, of all the joy he brought her. And she silently vowed to get through this. Anesthesia pulled her under, and for a time, everything went dark. Hours later, she surfaced in a blur of pain and disorientation. The nurses assured her the surgery was successful, though she would need to remain hospitalized for at least a week. The next few days were a blur of IV drips, pain medication, beeping machines, and concerned faces. Evelyn dozed on and off, sometimes imagining Harper curling up by her side, only to wake and find the hospital room empty. When Lily visited, she reported that Harper was not eating well, picking at his food, pacing around the house, as though waiting for Evelyn to walk through the door. When Lily brought him on a leash for a brief visit outside the hospital, though not inside. Due to rules, Harper strained toward the entrance, whining at the automatic doors, desperate to get to his owner. Though Lily tried to coax him away, Harper dug his paws into the concrete and refused to leave the threshold for a long moment. The nurses inside, seeing a distressed dog on the other side of the glass, were curious. One of them, feeling pity, sneaked outside to say hello and maybe calm him down. Harper, though friendly by nature, refused all attempts at consolation that didn't involve Evelyn's actual presence. Eventually Lily managed to guide him back to the car. But that moment lingered in Lily's mind. Harper, standing as though at a sentinel post, whining softly, his entire posture pleading for someone to let him inside to see the person he considered his entire world. When Lily recounted this to Evelyn the following day, tears pricked at Evelyn's eyes. She wanted so badly to hold Harper, to let him know she was fighting her way back to him. Each time she drifted in and out of sleep, she pictured his face, those expressive eyes and that warm, loving nature. She resolved to recover as quickly as possible, to push through the pain so she could return to her best friend. Physical therapy began, involving short walks down the hospital corridor. Every step felt like a triumph and a torment all at once. But whenever her mind threatened to sink into a pit of despair, she imagined Harper at the hospital's doors, refusing to budge, refusing to let her go. That image became her rallying cry. Her doctors, noticing her determination, marveled at how quickly she was regaining mobility. While she still suffered significant pain, especially around the surgical site, her vitals improved daily, and she continued to pass each required milestone of recovery. Evelyn confessed to one nurse that she had a loyal dog at home waiting for her. And the nurse smiled gently, saying she understood. Sometimes, the love of a pet is the best medicine. And so it seemed. By the end of the first week, the doctor agreed that Evelyn might be discharged soon, provided no complications arose. When Lily delivered the news that Harper had essentially gone on a near hunger strike, eating just enough to sustain himself but nothing more, Evelyn felt her heart twist with both worry and gratitude. She wondered if that was how she would be if the roles were reversed, unable to function without him. On the morning of the potential discharge, Lily arranged for Harper to wait in the car while she checked with the nurses. As soon as the hospital staff gave the green light, Lily rushed to help Evelyn gather her belongings. Walking slowly, bracing herself against a cane the hospital had provided, Evelyn made her way out of the ward. The stark white corridors, the smell of disinfectant, the clatter of rolling carts, all of it felt more bearable because she was leaving. She stepped out into the crisp winter air, a swirl of snow dancing on the wind. And there, in Lily's car, she saw Harper's broad silhouette in the backseat. The moment she opened the door, Harper scrambled forward, pressing his muzzle against her abdomen, gently, as though aware of her weakened state, and letting out a series of excited whimpers. Evelyn sank onto the seat and wrapped her arms around his thick neck. Ignoring the stab of pain in her side, she buried her face against his fur, inhaling that familiar scent of dog shampoo and something indescribably Harper. She felt his tail thumping against the seat, as though he could hardly contain his relief. Lily stood back, her eyes bright with emotion, letting them have their reunion. The drive home was slow. The roads were slick with fresh snow. But inside the car, an incandescent warmth filled the space. Harper rested his head on Evelyn's lap carefully, as if he'd grown more mature in her absence. Each time the car went over a small bump, he glanced up at her face, as if checking to see if she was in pain or if she needed his support. Evelyn found herself whispering promises to him, that she would heal, that they would take walks again, that she would never leave him for so long unless it was absolutely necessary. Harper responded with a soft huff, pressing closer. Back at the house, Lily helped Evelyn inside, carrying a tote bag of discharge papers, medications, and comfort items. The place smelled of pine from the small Christmas tree Evelyn had set up before her surgery, and of the faint mustiness that happens when a house is left mostly unoccupied. As soon as Harper realized they were truly home, he guided Evelyn, just by walking alongside her, toward the couch. She lowered herself gingerly onto the cushions, and Harper hopped up, curling around her feet. Lily, smiling at the sight, quietly slipped away to let them have their moment. Evelyn couldn't fully articulate the relief of being in her own living room, with her loyal friend at her side, though the road to recovery stretched before her, uncertain and filled with potential pitfalls. She felt anchored by Harper's presence. She fell into a light doze, lulled by the lullaby of Harper's rhythmic breathing and the hush of snow falling outside. When she woke an hour later, he was still there, ears perked, watching over her like a vigilant guardian. Recovery turned out to be both arduous and unpredictable. There were days Evelyn felt almost normal, able to shuffle around the house and even manage simple tasks like making tea or tidying up. Then there were days when pain or overwhelming fatigue kept her confined to the couch or bed. Through it all, Harper was steadfast. He seemed to sense when she needed extra rest, lying quietly nearby, occasionally resting his chin on the edge of her cushion. On the few better days, he would trot to the door, leash in his mouth, asking for a short walk. Those walks, no matter how brief, became a symbol of progress. Each step along the sidewalk was a defiance of the cancer that had tried to halt Evelyn's life. Neighbors would wave from afar, some offering murmured support, others simply smiling in encouragement. But no one missed the quiet devotion of the Pitbull guiding his beloved owner forward. As the holiday season approached, local families set up twinkling lights that brightened the early evening darkness. Evelyn and Harper would step outside in the crisp air, making it 2 or 3 houses down the block before she needed to rest. Then they would turn back. It was a slow and halting progress, but it was forward progress nonetheless. The doctors were pleased with her post-surgery scans. The cancer hadn't spread to nearby lymph nodes, though she would still require close monitoring. Evelyn discovered new depths of Harper's personality during this trying time. He was playful when she had the energy, coaxing her to toss a soft toy around the living room, careful not to demand more activity than she could give. When she was too tired or sore, he'd quietly snuggle against her, content just to be near. Late in the evening, if pain kept her awake, she would feel him shift in the dark, scooting closer so she could rest a hand on his side. The warmth of his fur and the steady thump of his tail were sometimes enough to lull her back to sleep. Her friends often remarked that Harper seemed to know more about compassion than many humans. Some visited and brought soup or well wishes, but they inevitably marveled at Harper's gentle watchfulness. A few even confessed that they had once been afraid of Pitbulls. But seeing Harper's devotion tore down their misconceptions. It was in these small, daily demonstrations of care that the most potent transformation occurred. Not only was Evelyn healing, but so were the biases some neighbors had clung to. The quiet heroism of Harper's dedication reminded everyone that dogs are individuals, shaped by love and environment, not by a label. Months passed, bringing slow but sure recovery. Evelyn returned to part-time work, aided by flexible hours and the ability to work from home. She set up a small workspace near the living room window, so she could glance out at the changing seasons and watch Harper doze in a sunny patch on the floor. Each keystroke on her laptop felt like a step back into normalcy. Yet normal had a new definition now. She had stared mortality in the face and was emerging with fresh appreciation for everyday blessings: a warm home, a wagging tail, a body that stubbornly refused to give up. Though the worst seemed behind them, Evelyn still had to go for regular checkups. Anxiety gnawed at her before each appointment, the thought of a recurring tumor looming in the back of her mind. Each time, Harper sensed her jitters. He would sit close, pressing his flank against her legs, as though providing silent reassurance. More than once, she found herself murmuring, "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." And Harper, gazing at her with those trusting eyes, seemed to say he understood. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the shadows of crisis receded further. The surgical scar on Evelyn's side remained a testament to what she had endured. Meanwhile, Harper's muzzle grew a bit broader, his body filling out into the prime of adulthood. His fur gleamed with health. Sometimes, as he lay sprawled on the living room rug, Evelyn ran her fingers over his back, remembering how scrawny and uncertain he had been as a rescued puppy. Now he was a picture of strength. Yet that strength was most evident in his capacity to love and protect. One crisp afternoon, after an encouraging medical checkup, Evelyn felt confident enough to attempt a longer walk around the neighborhood. She clipped Harper's leash on, and the two stepped outside under a sky streaked with pink and orange. Her pace was still modest, but she felt none of the fatigue that had plagued her in the early stages of recovery. They passed the small pond at the edge of town, the spot where they had once jogged in the dawn light. Harper looked up at her, tail wagging, as if to ask if they should try to go a bit farther. Evelyn smiled and patted his head, deciding that yes, they would push on. They made it halfway around the pond, pausing occasionally to take in the view. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine needles. Ducks glided across the water, and Harper seemed entranced by their gentle quacking. Evelyn felt her heart swell with gratitude for second chances, for the medical interventions that saved her life, for the loyal dog who had refused to let her lose hope. By the time they completed the circuit around the pond, twilight had settled in, and a soft hush enveloped the path. Evelyn glanced at Harper, whose gaze was fixed on her, as though waiting to see if she needed to rest. She realized she wasn't tired yet. Instead, she felt more alive than she had in a long time. That night, as they settled in at home, Evelyn received a phone call from her Aunt Celeste, a relative who had heard about her illness but hadn't been in close contact for years. Something about surviving a life-threatening illness sometimes mended old family rifts. Or at least prompted people to reach out. They spoke for nearly an hour. Harper lay curled at Evelyn's feet, occasionally shifting to press his nose against her leg, as if reminding her he was there. At one point, Celeste asked about Harper, her voice tinged with curiosity. "You know, I've always heard Pitbulls were trouble. But it sounds like he's been your guardian angel." Evelyn smiled, her eyes softening. "I couldn't have gotten through this without him," she said simply. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the moments of crisis, the panic she felt upon hearing her diagnosis, the bleak hospital stay, and especially the image of Harper whining at the hospital doors, refusing to move. That unwavering loyalty had been the light in the darkest room. She decided to write about it. After all, she was an editor by trade, and words had always been a friend to her. So late at night, she tapped out the beginnings of a manuscript, her story, and Harper's. She wrote about his big, worried eyes, about the days he spent barely eating because of her absence, about how just the thought of returning to him had given her the strength to walk down that hospital corridor. She didn't know if she'd ever publish the piece, but it felt cathartic to pour it all onto the screen. While she wrote, Harper would curl up beside her, occasionally lifting his head to see if she was okay. Sometimes she read passages aloud to him, letting her voice fill the stillness of the living room, and each time, he would blink slowly, as though absorbing her every word. In quieter moments, Evelyn could hardly believe how drastically her life had changed in the span of a year. From adopting a rescued puppy to battling cancer, she had walked a road lined with uncertainty. Now she emerged stronger, carrying a deep sense of connection to this dog who had become her anchor. One afternoon, Dr. Albright, the veterinarian, stopped by. He had heard about Evelyn's illness and was curious to see how Harper was doing. Evelyn offered him tea, and they sat in the living room while Harper lounged contentedly at their feet. Dr. Albright examined Harper casually, noting the shine in his coat and the calm contentment in his eyes. He turned to Evelyn with a gentle smile. "I always tell people that Pitbulls are some of the most loyal, affectionate dogs I've ever seen," he said, swirling his tea thoughtfully. "It's clear that Harper has taken that loyalty to heart. He's devoted to you in a way that not every pet owner bond achieves." Evelyn nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. "I owe him more than I can ever express," she replied softly. The veterinarian patted her arm, understanding that sometimes words weren't enough to capture what dogs like Harper truly meant. By the time Dr. Albright left, the sun was low in the sky, casting golden light across the living room. Harper hopped onto the couch, resting his head on Evelyn's lap, gazing up at her as if to say that he, too, understood the magnitude of what they shared. As winter melted into spring, life resumed a gentle rhythm. Evelyn's strength returned in earnest, and she even took on more projects at work. Occasionally, though, a pang of fear would strike her. What if the cancer returned? On those nights, she'd catch herself trembling in bed, remembering the hospital beeps and the antiseptic smell. Invariably, Harper would sense her anxiety, creeping up to lie beside her. His body radiating warmth, she would place her hand on his flank, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, and let it calm her racing heart. Bit by bit, she learned to live with the uncertainty, focusing on the preciousness of each day rather than the dread of what might come next. It was around this time that a new neighbor moved in next door. A woman named Tessa, who had a young daughter named Ruby. Ruby was fascinated by Harper, yet initially fearful because she had heard all the dangerous dog stereotypes from kids at her previous school. One day, she peeked through the fence as Evelyn and Harper played fetch in the yard. Evelyn noticed the small face peering through the slats and invited Ruby to meet Harper properly. The girl approached hesitantly, her wide eyes darting between Evelyn's encouraging smile and Harper's muscled frame. Harper, sensing her caution, sat down quietly, tail wagging gently across the grass. With Evelyn's reassurance, Ruby reached out a trembling hand. Harper responded with a gentle lick, and Ruby giggled in surprise. Over the next few weeks, Ruby would come by more frequently, always asking if she could see Harper. Each time, the dog offered the same calm greeting, eventually winning Ruby's trust so fully that the girl would sit beside him on the lawn, running her little hands over his back as though he were a gentle giant. Tessa watched from a distance at first, but as she saw how patient Harper was, her wariness subsided. It was another quiet victory in the battle against ingrained bias. One more example of Harper's ability to touch hearts that once held doubt. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued writing her manuscript, shaping it into a cohesive story that she titled By My Side. The act of writing served as a second recovery, helping her process the emotional toll of her illness and the depth of Harper's devotion. She even let Tessa read a chapter, wanting to see how someone less intimately involved might respond. Tessa, a teacher by profession, read through the pages and emerged teary-eyed. "It's beautiful," she told Evelyn. "I had no idea Pitbulls could be like Harper, and I think more people need to hear stories like this." Encouraged, Evelyn decided to submit an excerpt to a local writing contest. She had no grand ambitions other than wanting to share her experience. Weeks later, she was stunned to learn that her piece had won first place, earning a small cash prize and the chance to read her work at a local community event. Though she was nervous, she accepted the invitation. On the day of the reading, she stood at a small podium in the town library, the same library where she had once quietly edited manuscripts for her publishing job. Harper wasn't allowed inside, but Tessa and Ruby offered to walk him around the courtyard, so he was nearby. Evelyn's voice trembled at first as she began. "I never considered myself a fighter until the day I learned I had cancer. And I never realized how much strength and comfort could come from a dog. A pit bull named Harper, who refused to accept life without me." She recounted the hospital visits, the nights of pain, and Harper's near refusal to eat when she was gone. By the time she finished, a hush had settled over the library. A few audience members wiped their eyes. The applause that followed felt like a gentle wave of understanding and support. Outside, Harper must have sensed her relief, because as soon as she stepped onto the sidewalk, he bounded up to her, though gently, tail wagging in circles. She stroked his ears, whispering her gratitude for all he had given her, for letting her stand there and speak her truth. Once the event concluded, a handful of people approached Evelyn to share their own stories of dogs who had carried them through hardship. Some had pit bulls, others had different breeds, but the common thread was clear: the profound emotional bond between human and canine, and the healing power it could wield. Evelyn felt a new sense of purpose forming. She realized she wanted to continue writing, to continue sharing stories that might change how people viewed dogs like Harper. In the months that followed, she devoted more time to refining her manuscript, eventually gathering the courage to query small publishers. The response was surprisingly warm. Several expressed interest in hearing more, while it was still too early to celebrate a book deal. The simple fact that they saw promise in her work was thrilling. Throughout it all, Harper remained her loyal companion, seemingly unaware of how his presence had become a beacon of inspiration. He only knew that Evelyn was healthy again, and that they could walk the pond path or lounge on the couch as they once had. He only knew that when she typed at her computer for hours, he should lie next to her in calm solidarity. If Evelyn felt the flicker of old anxieties, chest-tightening memories of hospital rooms, Harper dispelled them by resting his muzzle on her lap. By the time spring fully bloomed, the cherry trees lining Cherrybrook Lane were draped in blossoms. Petals drifted through the air, creating a soft pink snowfall. Evelyn watched them from her window, reminded that the fragility and beauty of life often coexist. She planned to celebrate the change in seasons by hosting a small gathering at her home, a mix of neighbors, coworkers, and friends. It would be her first real social event since her diagnosis. She wanted to show appreciation for those who had supported her through her ordeal. And she wanted them to see the gentle dog who had kept her hope alive. When the day arrived, she lit a few candles, laid out simple snacks, and opened her door to a small but treasured circle of people. Miriam from her office came with a bottle of non-alcoholic cider. Lily arrived with a homemade pie, and Tessa and Ruby brought a bouquet of flowers for the coffee table. Harper, excited by the flurry of greetings. Greeted each guest politely. He circled around, tail wagging, letting them pet his wide head and sturdy neck. As he made his rounds, Evelyn realized how drastically he had reshaped people's attitudes about Pitbulls. Many of these same individuals, upon first meeting him, had cast worried glances or offered hesitant touches. Now they were cooing at him like he was the sweetest creature they had ever encountered. The evening was filled with laughter and quiet conversation. The topics ranging from new books to weekend plans to recollections of the day Evelyn returned from the hospital. At one point, Tessa asked if Evelyn ever feared Harper might revert to some stereotypical, aggressive pitbull behavior. Evelyn considered the question carefully. Cradling her tea, she glanced at Harper, who was lying near Ruby's feet, letting her place colorful stickers on his collar. "I don't fear that," she said at last, her voice soft but certain. "Because I know who he is. He's not a stereotype. He's an individual who has shown me nothing but love. The only aggression I've ever seen in him is when he's barking at the squirrels that tease him outside the window." A gentle round of chuckles followed, and Tessa nodded thoughtfully. Later in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Evelyn sat on the porch swing with Lily, watching the moon rise above the rooftops. Harper curled up next to them, content in the mild night air. Lily sighed, a hint of nostalgia in her tone. "You know, I've lived here a while, and I've never seen such a tight-knit moment in this community until you got sick. People really came together, and Harper was at the center of it. In a way, funny how a dog can teach us to be more human, isn't it?" Evelyn smiled, stroking Harper's ears. "I think sometimes animals reflect our best qualities," she said, "if we let them." Before long, Lily said her goodbyes, and the house grew quiet again. The porch was awash in moonlight, the soft chirping of crickets filling the silence. Evelyn felt a sense of contentment sink into her bones. It was a feeling she had become intimate with since her recovery, a gratitude tinged with the awareness of life's fragility. She turned to Harper, who gazed back with those warm brown eyes that had first captured her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, resting her forehead gently against his. "Thank you for waiting for me when I was in the hospital. Thank you for being my reason to keep fighting." Harper responded with a slight tilt of his head, as though to say he would always be there, no matter what. In the silent language of companionship, that was enough. The chill of late autumn settled over Cherrybrook Lane with the grace of falling leaves. Streaks of crimson and gold drifted from the branches overhead, gathering in piles along the curbs. Evelyn stood at her kitchen window, watching a gust of wind swirl the leaves into a little whirlwind. Beside her, Harper sat quietly, as if he, too, was absorbing the turn of the season. His muzzle had begun to show a dusting of white, a gentle reminder that neither of them was the same as when this story began. Yet if his eyes had grown older, they had also grown kinder. It was a calm, reflective day, one that made Evelyn think back on all the transformations they had experienced together. She found herself recalling the first time Harper had refused to eat while she was in the hospital. Those moments when his loyalty had carried her through her darkest hours. He had remained her unwavering guardian, helping her rebuild her life and health step by step. Over the years, new challenges had arisen, but each time Harper stood at Evelyn's side, offering silent encouragement, and as she studied his profile in the soft morning light, she felt an enduring gratitude that seemed almost too large to hold inside her chest. On the countertop, a thick bundle of pages lay clipped together, the final draft of her manuscript. By my side, months earlier, she had sold the story to a small but reputable publisher. The book was scheduled for release in just a few weeks, and the local buzz around it was growing. Newspapers had reached out, and the library invited her to do another reading. More surprisingly, an independent bookstore in the next town over had approached her about hosting a signing. Though Evelyn was excited, she was also deeply aware that these opportunities had come about largely because of Harper's role in her life, because he had shown a depth of devotion that readers found remarkable. In truth, she considered it his story as much as hers. A soft whine pulled her out of her thoughts. Harper was nudging her leg, as though to remind her that it was time for their morning routine. She smiled, running a hand over his ears. "All right, boy," she said, "let's not keep the world waiting." She grabbed his leash and stepped into the crisp air. The breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney, mingling with the earthy perfume of damp leaves. Harper trotted beside her, content to move at a relaxed pace. They started down Cherrybrook Lane, greeting neighbors who had come to know Harper as the friendliest pitbull on the block. Tessa's daughter Ruby was outside, building a leaf pile, and she waved with both arms. Harper wagged his tail in response, always happy to see his young friend. Near the pond, they paused to watch a pair of ducks glide across the still water. This spot held so many memories for them: jogs in the early morning light, quiet walks after Evelyn's surgery, reflective moments when either she or Harper needed peace. The branches overhead had grown nearly bare now, letting bright shards of sunlight dapple the ground. Evelyn felt a quiet sense of awe at how life continued its cycles. Even after hard winters, spring always arrived. Even after illness, a form of healing always presented itself. Harper nudged her again, this time more insistently. Evelyn laughed softly. I know, she teased. I'm getting philosophical. And you want to keep moving. They continued around the pond at a leisurely pace, eventually returning to the sidewalk that led toward home. By the time they reached the front gate, Harper's tail was still wagging, and Evelyn's cheeks carried the glow of brisk air and contentment. Inside, she prepared a modest breakfast, oatmeal for her, and fresh kibble for Harper, garnished with a drizzle of low-sodium chicken broth he adored. In his younger years, he would gobble food in seconds. Now he ate more carefully, pausing between bites to give her a grateful look. She found his slower pace endearing, a reflection of his gentle aging. They had both earned the right to take life at a pace that honored the miles they had traveled. That afternoon, Evelyn had an appointment at the local community center to go over final details for a Meet the Author event. When she arrived, she discovered that the flyer advertising her book featured a photo of her and Harper. The dog's broad, sweet face took center stage beside the event details. Evelyn laughed with the event coordinator, who admitted that they had chosen Harper's image intentionally, knowing it would attract attention. And indeed, people were curious, since the book's synopsis mentioned a Pitbull's unwavering loyalty. Even those who typically avoided dog stories were intrigued. After the planning session ended, Evelyn dropped by the office of Dr. Albright, her veterinarian, to pick up Harper's joint supplements and schedule a checkup. Dr. Albright had continued to follow Harper's health closely over the years. Whenever they spoke, he commented on how Harper's temperament remained as calm and caring as ever, even as he entered his senior years. Bring him in next week, Dr. Albright said. We'll do a thorough exam, just to make sure everything's on track. Evelyn thanked him, and as she turned to leave, the veterinarian called after her, voice warm. I'm looking forward to reading your book. By the way, if it's anything like what you've told me, it's going to open a lot of minds about Pitbulls. She gave a grateful nod. I hope so. It feels like the least I can do. To share Harper's story. He's changed so many perspectives already. The day of the checkup arrived bright and cold, frost etching silver patterns across the clinic's windows. Inside, Dr. Albright greeted Harper with a friendly pat and gentle words. He ran his hands along Harper's joints, pressed a stethoscope against his broad chest, and checked his eyes. Though Harper flinched a bit at having his ears examined, he had never quite enjoyed that. He remained patient, trusting the touch of the man who had cared for him since puppyhood. Once the exam concluded, Dr. Albright offered a small smile. I see some signs of arthritis in his hips, which we expected, but nothing alarming. His weight is good, heart sounds strong, he's in fine shape for his age. Evelyn felt relief wash over her. She reached down to stroke Harper's head. That's all I needed to hear. She arranged for a mild medication to help with Harper's arthritis flare-ups. As they headed home, the winter sun shone bright and low in the sky. Evelyn breathed a sigh of gratitude. She knew that every moment with Harper was a blessing. During the drive, Harper gazed out the window contentedly. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, she caught the outline of his ears perked at passing scenery, and a wave of profound tenderness swept over her. Later that evening, Evelyn settled at her computer to finalize a reading excerpt for the upcoming event. Harper lay beside her chair, occasionally letting out a soft sigh. The piece she planned to share focused on the chapter describing Harper's anguish during her hospital stay, the near hunger strike, the vigil he kept at her front window, the unstoppable loyalty that reminded her why she had to keep fighting. As she read the paragraphs aloud, her voice cracked. Even now, After years of healing, the memory tugged at her heart. Harper flicked an ear, alerted by her emotion, and sat up. He pressed his nose against her knee, as though to say, "I'm here. It's okay." She paused, gave him a reassuring pat, and continued reading. When she finished, she felt a mix of pride and sadness that Harper's devotion had been tested so profoundly, and pride that they had come through it stronger. She knelt on the floor beside him, leaning her forehead against his broad, warm shoulder. "I love you, Harper," she whispered. She knew he understood in his own way. The day of the Meet the Author event arrived in a bustle of activity. The local library's reading room was transformed with chairs, a small podium, and a table for signing books. Evelyn wore a simple blouse and slacks, her nerves fluttering as she approached the entrance. She had done a small reading once before, but nothing this formal. Lily, Miriam, Tessa, Ruby, and several other neighbors arrived to cheer her on. A few members of the local press showed up, cameras and notepads in hand. The highlight for Evelyn was seeing Dr. Albright in the front row, beaming like a proud relative. Harper, sporting a bandana that read, "I'm Harper," ambled in on his leash. The library staff, mindful of the dog's crucial role in Evelyn's story, had granted special permission for him to attend. As soon as he entered, several people rushed forward to greet him. He accepted their pats with calm grace, occasionally wagging his tail when someone scratched just the right spot behind his ears. A hush fell as Evelyn approached the podium, Harper settling beside her feet. She cleared her throat, scanning the small audience. It was a cozy group, maybe 30 people in total, but each face radiated support. She opened her copy of By My Side to the passage she had selected. It described a pivotal night when her pain was at its worst, and she was thinking of giving up, only to remember Harper's refusal to eat unless she came home. Her voice trembled at first, but as she read, she felt Harper's presence like a steadying hand. She finished with a line that had become something of a personal mantra. "If he refused to let me go, how could I let go of myself?" Applause broke out the moment she closed the book. Evelyn blinked back tears, glancing down at Harper. He responded by resting his chin on her foot, an anchor in a swirling sea of emotion. People formed a line to have their copies signed, some wanting to hear more about Harper's early days, others sharing their own stories of a beloved pet's unwavering devotion. One woman tearfully admitted she had always been afraid of Pitbulls but felt compelled to read the book after hearing about Harper's gentleness. "I've been wrong," she confessed. "I'm so grateful to learn that dogs like Harper exist." Evelyn thanked her, heart full, writing a short personalized note inside the book's cover. "For a kinder world, one story at a time," she penned, signing her name. Dr. Albright gave her a congratulatory hug, remarking that he would keep the book in the clinic's waiting area for others to read. Tessa and Ruby stayed until the end, Ruby hugging Harper goodbye and placing a little sticker on his bandana, one shaped like a heart. By the time Evelyn and Harper returned home, dusk had settled, and the sky glowed in shades of deep purple and orange. She fed Harper his evening meal, then changed into comfortable clothes. As she curled up on the couch, a sense of calm accomplishment enveloped her. The event had been small, but it had felt monumental, a final puzzle piece clicking into place after years of recovery, writing, and introspection. Harper hopped up and settled against her. She rubbed his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "We did it," she whispered. "You and me." The weeks following the event passed in a contented blur. The local newspaper ran a feature story on Evelyn and Harper, describing how their journey from adversity to hope was changing perceptions around Pitbulls. Donations to the local shelter increased. Evelyn even heard that one of the Pitbulls at the shelter, a shy brindle named Dolly, had found a loving home specifically because the adopters had been inspired by Harper's story. The news brought tears to her eyes. She remembered the heartbreak of Harper's puppyhood, abandoned in a ditch, and now his experience was helping others see past a label. Winter soon arrived in earnest. Snow coated the sidewalks in glistening white drifts, and the temperature dipped below freezing most days. Harper's arthritis flared up a bit in the cold, so Evelyn took to bundling him in a snug dog coat before walks. He tolerated it with mild embarrassment, but she could tell it eased his stiffness. Sometimes, after a short loop around the block, they'd hurry back inside, shaking off the flakes clinging to their clothes. Then they'd settle in front of the fireplace. A cozy ritual they had cultivated over the years. One late December evening, as they lounged in the glow of the fire, Evelyn found herself thinking about life's unpredictable arcs, how she had gone from a solitary existence to forging a bond so deep with a dog that his mere presence had saved her spirit during her darkest days. She recalled the harrowing nights in the hospital, the moment Harper had pressed his forehead against her chest as though transferring his strength to her. The memory still stirred something powerful inside her, a mix of awe and gratitude that words failed to capture. Gazing at Harper, she saw that his eyes were half-lidded, yet he looked utterly content. She stroked the soft fur along his neck, feeling the gentle vibration of his breath beneath her palm. In that peaceful bubble of flickering firelight, she made a quiet promise. No matter how many days or years remained, she would make them count. She would continue writing, continue advocating for better understanding of Pitbulls, and above all, continue cherishing every moment with her four-legged companion. The new year dawned with a fresh blanket of snow, and Evelyn resolved to set up a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. She decided to use her book's modest success to raise awareness and funds specifically for Pitbulls and other misunderstood breeds. With the help of Tessa, Miriam, and several other neighbors, she organized a small winter festival in the local park. A portion of the proceeds would go directly to the shelter's programs. Harper became the festival's unofficial mascot. His face featured on flyers and online posts advertising the event. When the festival day arrived, the park buzzed with energy despite the chilly weather. Families sipped hot chocolate, children decorated cookies shaped like dog bones, and local artisans sold handmade crafts. An adoption booth was set up by the shelter, showcasing photos and profiles of dogs who needed homes. Many of them were labeled bully breed mixes. Evelyn stood behind a table piled with copies of By My Side, autographing them for attendees. Harper dozed at her feet, wagging his tail each time someone reached down to pat his head. Near the end of the festival, a young couple approached the adoption booth. They had initially come just for the hot chocolate and family fun, but they found themselves drawn to a sweet Pitbull mix named Honey. She was about 2 years old, with a golden coat and a shy demeanor. The volunteers explained that Honey had been overlooked for weeks, mostly because of her breed. Evelyn watched from her table as the couple hesitantly asked to meet her. They crouched down, coaxing Honey to come forward. She did, tail wagging uncertainly, eyes bright with curiosity. Within minutes, the woman was hugging Honey, tears in her eyes, and the man was snapping photos on his phone. Evelyn's heart skipped with joy when they signed the adoption papers that very day. Later, the couple approached Evelyn and Harper, thanking them both. "We read your book a while back," the woman said softly, eyes brimming with emotion. "It made us realize that Pitbulls can be gentle souls, no different from any other dog. And we decided we'd adopt one someday. I guess that day came sooner than we thought." Evelyn smiled, a lump of emotion knotting her throat. She watched them wave goodbye, Honey padding alongside them, stepping into her new life. It felt like witnessing a small miracle, one more testament to how love and understanding could reshape destinies. That evening, after the festival successfully wrapped up, Evelyn and Harper returned to their cozy living room. Exhausted but elated, she tallied the donations, astonished at the generosity of her neighbors and local businesses. Thousands of dollars had been raised, enough to fund more vaccines, spay, neuter surgeries, and extended shelter hours. As she relayed the numbers in a phone call to the shelter's director, Harper ambled over, resting his head on her lap as though sharing in her quiet triumph. With the spark of inspiration still glowing, Evelyn decided to pitch an idea to the shelter. A program where volunteers could bring adoptable Pitbulls and other misunderstood breeds to public events, accompanied by stories of dogs like Harper. The goal would be to allow people to meet these dogs firsthand, thus dispelling fear through experience. The shelter director thought it was a brilliant plan. They named the initiative Hearts Open, and the library quickly offered to host the first event. Evelyn volunteered to read passages from her book while the dogs mingled with attendees. It was set to take place in early spring, once the snow had melted and the roads were clear. During the final stretch of winter, Harper's arthritis flared again, requiring a bit more medication and gentler walks. Evelyn adapted their routine, making sure he had plush, supportive bedding and plenty of rest. She recognized that time was marching on for him, that no dog is eternal. But she refused to let sadness overshadow their present. Instead, she made daily adjustments to honor his comfort, lifting him into the car rather than letting him jump, or offering a ramp so he could climb onto the couch without strain. Yet for all his aging, Harper's spirit remained bright. Whenever Evelyn introduced something new, like a puzzle toy filled with peanut butter, he tackled it with puppy-like enthusiasm, wagging his tail so vigorously that his hips wiggled. And whenever a neighbor or friend dropped by, he was right there at the door, greeting them with his gentle eyes and trademark friendliness. As the spring event for Hearts Open approached, Evelyn felt a pleasant anticipation. This was not just a reading or a festival. It was a chance for multiple dogs to show the community how affectionate and deserving they were. On the day of the event, the sun shone warmly for the first time in weeks, melting the last patches of snow. A line of curious visitors formed outside the library, drawn by flyers featuring pictures of adoptable dogs and the phrase, "Come meet your new best friend." Inside, the reading room was filled with blankets and cushions for the dogs. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, each one displaying a name and photo of a shelter dog. Volunteers stood ready to share each dog's story. Some had sad beginnings. Others had simply been surrendered due to life changes. Despite these varied pasts, the dogs wagged their tails, licked outstretched hands, and relished every bit of attention. Harper, sporting the same bandana from the earlier library event, entered with a dignified air, as though he knew he was a role model. Dr. Albright was there, greeting him with a soft chuckle. "All right, old friend," he murmured, scratching under Harper's chin. "Show him how it's done." Evelyn couldn't help but smile, reminded of the countless times Dr. Albright had guided them through checkups and uncertain diagnoses. The afternoon was a resounding success. Families chatted with volunteers, sat on the floor with dogs curled at their sides, and listened as Evelyn read an excerpt from By My Side. She chose a hopeful chapter this time, one describing her newfound resilience after surgery, and how Harper's unwavering presence had helped her see life as a gift rather than a sentence. When she finished, there was a moment of reverent silence, followed by applause and an excited flurry of voices. A few more adoption applications were filled out on the spot, which set the shelter staff beaming. When the event ended, Evelyn stepped outside, where the temperature had climbed enough to smell the damp earth of early spring. Harper trotted beside her, tail gently swishing. Lily approached with a grin, telling Evelyn that 3 Pitbulls, including Dolly, were heading to meet prospective families. "It's amazing," Lily said. "You and Harper are changing hearts. One day at a time." Evelyn knelt to rub Harper's ears. "He's the real star," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm just the one who got lucky enough to share his story." Spring gradually unfurled across the neighborhood, replacing the last vestiges of winter with budding flowers and the chirping of returning birds. Evelyn and Harper fell into a fresh routine, short morning strolls, writing sessions in the afternoon, and, on the weekends, visits to the shelter to help out with the Hearts Open program. Each time they went, Harper would greet the dogs with gentle sniffs. Some would cower at first, others would bounce forward, but Harper maintained his composed kindness. It was almost as if he sensed their uncertainty, offering a calming presence that said, "You're safe here." One morning, while Evelyn and Harper were volunteering, the shelter director approached them, looking both excited and nervous. She explained that a regional news outlet had caught wind of Hearts Open and wanted to do a segment on how one dog, Harper, had inspired the program. They requested footage of Evelyn reading from her book, shots of Harper interacting with adoptable dogs, and interviews with families who had adopted through the program. Evelyn felt a flutter in her chest. She had grown comfortable with smaller events, but this was a bigger stage. Still, the chance to advocate further for misunderstood breeds was too important to pass up. On the day of filming, the cameras rolled as Evelyn read one of her most poignant passages, about Harper's vigil at the hospital door, waiting in vain for the moment they would allow him inside to see her. The news crew then captured Harper calmly meeting dogs in the kennels. It was remarkable footage, a senior Pitbull stepping gently up to chain-link fences, ears perked, tail wagging, while frightened or anxious dogs relaxed in response to his quiet reassurance. One dog, a young male Pitbull mix who had been cowering in the corner, approached the fence to sniff Harper's nose. Within moments, they were wagging their tails at each other. A brief but telling sign that even a scared dog could find confidence with the right guide. Interviews followed. Families who had adopted Pitbulls through the program described the laughter, love, and companionship these dogs brought into their homes. Dr. Albright spoke on camera about breed misconceptions, praising Harper as an ambassador for all Pitbulls. Evelyn, sitting on a bench with Harper at her feet, recounted their journey in a voice that quivered with earnest feeling. "When I was sick," she said, looking into the camera, "he refused to give up on me. So I refused to give up on myself. And if there's one message I hope people get from Harper's story, it's that love and loyalty don't come with a breed label. They come from the bond you form and the care you give." The news segment aired a week later, sparking a wave of interest. Calls and emails poured into the shelter, and more families signed up for Hearts Open events. The library even had to reorder copies of By My Side, because local readers checked out every available copy. Evelyn watched the ripple effect in awe, astonished that what started as a personal battle against cancer had evolved into a movement of empathy for dogs like Harper. Meanwhile, Harper's day-to-day life remained delightfully ordinary. He still dozed in sunlit patches on the living room floor, still wandered into the kitchen every time he heard the refrigerator door open, and still snuggled with Evelyn on the couch at night. But as the months passed, subtle changes emerged. He moved more stiffly upon waking, slept a bit more during the day, and occasionally needed a lift into the car. Evelyn embraced these changes with quiet acceptance. He was aging, yes, but the essence of who he was, his unwavering devotion, remained as vibrant as ever. One summer evening, after an especially busy day of writing and volunteering, Evelyn noticed Harper seemed more sluggish than usual. He ate dinner slowly, lying down halfway through. Concerned, she offered him water and coaxed him to rest in his soft bed. By morning, he hadn't touched his breakfast. Alarmed, Evelyn rushed him to Dr. Albright's clinic. There, they discovered that Harper's arthritis had flared severely, accompanied by an inflamed area around his hips that suggested a possible secondary infection. Tests were done, and Dr. Albright put Harper on antibiotics and pain relievers. The next few days were tense, with Evelyn monitoring Harper closely. She felt her anxiety spike, recalling how hospitals and medical interventions had once dominated her own life. Now, she prayed that Harper would recover. She spent hours by his side, stroking his fur, reading aloud to him. The roles felt reversed. He had once watched over her in a hospital bed, and now she hovered, determined not to lose him. Gradually, the medication took effect, and the swelling subsided. Dr. Albright reassured her that while Harper was slowing down due to age, there was no immediate threat to his life. Relieved tears stung Evelyn's eyes as she carried Harper's medication home. Outside the clinic, she let him rest on a patch of grass before coaxing him into the car. Sitting in the driver's seat, she hugged the steering wheel for a long moment, letting gratitude wash over her. Harper dozed in the back seat, but when she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw his tail give a gentle wag, as if to say, "I'm still here, don't worry." From then on, she adapted further to Harper's needs. She ramped up the use of soft bedding, scheduled frequent checkups, and stuck to shorter, more frequent walks. Despite these limitations, Harper's spirit remained bright. He continued attending the Hearts Open events, albeit in shorter stints. Each time, visitors marveled that even when in apparent discomfort, he greeted them with patience and a quiet, steadfast energy. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost a full year after the news segment, Evelyn and Harper were invited to a bigger book fair in a neighboring city. A panel discussion on the power of pet-human bonds would include veterinarians, fellow authors, and rescue advocates. Evelyn debated whether to bring Harper, worried about the long car ride and the hustle of the fair. But Dr. Albright assured her that, with plenty of breaks and the right supplements, Harper could manage if he seemed willing. On the morning of the event, she asked Harper, "What do you think, old boy? Are you up for a little adventure?" He eyed her calmly, then rose with a stretch, nudging his muzzle against the leash that hung by the door. Evelyn laughed, taking that as his yes. They arrived at the bustling convention hall, which hummed with conversations and the scent of freshly printed books. The panel took place in a spacious room with rows of fold-out chairs. Evelyn guided Harper to a comfortable spot on a thick blanket set behind her seat at the panel's table. The audience filtered in, and soon, the discussion began. Each panelist shared stories of animals who had changed lives, therapy dogs visiting hospitals, cats providing comfort in nursing homes, rescue horses aiding children with anxiety. When it was Evelyn's turn, she spoke of Harper's vigilance during her illness, describing how his presence had anchored her through fear and pain. As she spoke, she glanced at Harper. He lay quietly, tail thumping softly whenever she mentioned his name. After the panel, a small crowd gathered around, curious about Harper. Some asked to pet him. Others wanted to snap photos. He accepted their attention with gentle composure, letting strangers admire the dog who had inspired so many. Evelyn signed a few books, answering questions about the writing process. One older gentleman wiped away tears and said, "My wife is in the hospital right now. I only wish she could have a dog's comfort the way you did." Evelyn gently suggested contacting the hospital about therapy animal programs, and the man nodded gratefully. Toward the end of the day, Evelyn took Harper outside to a quiet patch of grass where they could decompress. The sun was low, turning the sky a warm amber. She sat on the grass, and Harper carefully lay beside her. In that moment, the steady hum of the city streets faded into the background, leaving just the two of them in a pocket of stillness. Evelyn stroked Harper's fur, aware of each shallow breath he took, each flick of his ear. A pang of melancholy swept through her, tinged with appreciation. "We've come a long way," she murmured. "You saved me, and I saved you, right?" Harper turned his head, pressing his muzzle against her forearm. She took that as an affirmation. The final rays of daylight caught the faint gray in his fur. Nothing lasts forever, but the bond they shared felt timeless, existing in a space where love overshadowed any fear of the future. They stayed like that for a while, letting time unspool gently. Eventually, the chill of evening air nudged them to return to the convention hall, gather their things, and drive home. Harper slept on the backseat, head resting against the door, while Evelyn navigated the highway with a quiet heart. Winter arrived once more, the ground powdered with snow by mid-December. Evelyn began receiving messages from readers all over the state. Some had found her book at libraries. Others had purchased it online after seeing the news segment. The recurring theme in these messages was gratitude. People thanked her for sharing Harper's story, explaining that it had prompted them to see Pitbulls differently, or even to adopt shelter dogs of their own. Each message felt like a small miracle, a ripple effect of the devotion Harper had shown on hospital doorsteps years ago. One evening, after reading through some especially moving emails, Evelyn sat down beside Harper on the living room rug. The fire crackled in the hearth, painting flickering shadows across the walls. Harper's eyelids drooped with contentment, but he lifted his head slightly when she settled in. She leaned against him, listening to his heartbeat, a familiar rhythm that had kept time through her struggles and joys. "What do you say we turn in early?" she whispered, feeling a lump in her throat. He nudged her cheek, as though to say he was game for any plan that involved being near her. Together, they headed to the bedroom. Harper climbed onto his cushioned dog bed with a stiffness that showed his age. But once settled, he gazed at her with that same eternal softness in his eyes. As Evelyn drifted to sleep, she let her mind wander through the tapestry of their years together. The first day she'd taken him in as a scrawny, frightened puppy. The months of training and the blossoming of trust. Her cancer diagnosis and the dark uncertainty that had tested their bond. Harper's refusal to accept her absence, and the surge of willpower it sparked in her. She thought of his gentleness with children, his calm at community events, his unspoken wisdom that had reshaped so many hearts. In the depths of her dreams, she imagined an endless field where she and Harper ran side by side, unburdened by illness, time, or any earthly constraint. Dawn broke beyond the window, pale light filtering through the curtains, and Evelyn stirred, a sense of peace lingering from her vision. She opened her eyes to find Harper already awake, watching her. It was as if he had kept vigil in her dreams. Leaning over, she caressed his graying face. "Morning, handsome," she said gently. Outside, life carried on with all its unpredictability, cars heading to work, neighbors bundling up against the cold, the sun rising to greet a world that sometimes felt indifferent. But within the walls of that modest house on Cherrybrook Lane, where daisies once swayed in the garden and healing took place in slow, determined increments, a pitbull named Harper reminded everyone who came near that hope and devotion can flourish even in the direst conditions. And that, in the end, was the gift he gave. A silent promise that love is stronger than fear. That companionship can bridge impossible gaps. And that even when shadows fall, a faithful heart can guide you to the light. For as long as they both still drew breath, Evelyn and Harper would move through each day, side by side, proving to the world that some bonds are forged to last, through hospital walls, through the changing of seasons, through every twist of fate.